The old house stood at the end of the street. Nobody lived there for many years. The windows were dark and covered with dust. The garden was full of tall grass and wild plants. Children from the neighborhood never went near it. They said the house was scary. But Sarah was different. She was 12 years old and loved adventure. She did not believe in scary stories. One sunny afternoon, she decided to look at the old house. Her friend Tom came with her. Tom was nervous, but he did not want to stay home alone. They walked slowly toward the house. The wooden gate made a loud noise when Sarah pushed it open. Tom jumped a little. Sarah laughed at him. They walked through the tall grass. It was so high that it reached their knees. Butterflies flew around them. Birds sang in the trees nearby. The front door of the house was big and brown. Paint was falling off in many places. Sarah tried to open it. The door was locked. She looked around and saw a window. The window was broken at the bottom. Sarah looked at Tom. He shook his head, but Sarah was already climbing through the window. Inside the house, everything was dark. Dust was everywhere. Old furniture stood covered with white sheets. It looked like ghosts were sitting in the room. Tom came in after Sarah. His hands were shaking. Sarah took out her phone and turned on the light. The light made long shadows on the walls. They walked through the first room. There were old paintings on the walls. The paintings showed people from long ago. They wore fancy clothes. Sarah wondered who they were. Maybe they lived in this house once. Tom stayed close behind her. He did not like the way the house smelled. It smelled old and damp. In the next room, they found a piano. It was covered in dust, but still looked beautiful. Sarah touched one of the keys. It made a sound. The sound was strange in the quiet house. Tom told her to stop. He said they should leave, but Sarah wanted to see more. They found stairs going up to the second floor. The stairs were wooden and old. They made creaking sounds with each step. Sarah went up first. Tom followed, but he kept looking back. He felt like someone was watching them, but when he turned around, nobody was there. Upstairs, there were many rooms. Most of them were empty. In one room, they found old books on shelves. Sarah picked up a book. The pages were yellow and fragile. The book was about plants and flowers. She put it back carefully. In another room, they found old clothes in a closet. The clothes looked fancy. There were long dresses and suits with hats. Then they found a room that was different. This room had toys in it. There were old dolls sitting on a shelf. There was a rocking horse in the corner. Sarah walked toward it. She touched the horse and it started to rock. Tom said they should go now. Something felt wrong about this room. The dolls seemed to be looking at them. Sarah saw something on the floor. It was a small wooden box. She picked it up and opened it. Inside was an old photograph. The photograph showed a family. There was a mother, a father, and a little girl. They were standing in front of this house, but the house looked new and beautiful in the picture. Sarah put the photograph in her pocket. She wanted to show it to her parents later. They heard a noise downstairs. Both of them stopped moving. They listened carefully. The noise came again. It sounded like footsteps. Tom grabbed Sarah's arm. His face was pale. Sarah put her finger on her lips. She told him to be quiet. They stood very still and listened. The footsteps were getting closer. Someone was coming up the stairs. Sarah and Tom looked at each other. They needed to hide. Sarah pointed to a closet. They both ran to it and got inside. They closed the door but left it open just a little bit. They could see through the crack. Their hearts were beating fast. Tom was breathing hard. Sarah told him to breathe slowly and quietly. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. They came down the hallway. They were getting closer to their room. Sarah and Tom held their breath. A shadow appeared at the door. It was the shadow of a person. The shadow moved into the room. Sarah could see shoes. They were old leather shoes. The person walked slowly around the room. They seemed to be looking for something. The person walked to the shelf with the dolls. They picked up one doll and looked at it. Then they put it back. They walked to the window and looked outside. Sarah and Tom stayed completely still. They were too scared to move. The person stood at the window for a long time. Finally, they turned around and walked toward the closet. Sarah's heart felt like it would jump out of her chest. Tom closed his eyes. The closet door opened. Light came in. Sarah looked up. She saw an old woman standing there. The woman had white hair and kind eyes. She did not look angry or scary. She looked surprised. The woman asked them what they were doing in her house. Her voice was soft and gentle. Sarah and Tom came out of the closet. They were embarrassed and scared at the same time. Sarah tried to explain. She said they were just exploring. They did not know anyone lived here. The old woman smiled a little. She said she understood. She said many children tried to come into the house, but Sarah and Tom were the first ones brave enough to actually come inside. The woman introduced herself. Her name was Mrs. Henderson. She said she lived in this house her whole life. Mrs. Henderson told them she usually stayed in the back part of the house. That was why people thought the house was empty. She said she liked her privacy, but she was not angry at the children. She could see they meant no harm. Tom apologized many times. He said they would leave right away. But Mrs. Henderson said they could stay for a little while. She said she would make them some tea. She did not have many visitors anymore. Sarah showed her the photograph she found. Mrs. Henderson's eyes became wet with tears. She said that was her family. The little girl in the picture was her when she was young. Her parents were gone now. She lived alone. Sarah felt sad for her. Mrs. Henderson said the house had many memories. That was why she never wanted to leave it. They followed Mrs. Henderson downstairs. She moved slowly, but she knew every step. She took them to the back of the house. There was a kitchen there. It was clean and tidy. It was very different from the rest of the house. There was a small table with 2 chairs. Mrs. Henderson brought another chair from the corner. She told them to sit down. She put the kettle on the stove to make tea. Sarah looked around the kitchen. There were pictures on the walls. Most of them showed Mrs. Henderson with different people. There were pictures of her as a young woman. She was very pretty. There were pictures of her with a man. Mrs. Henderson saw Sarah looking at the pictures. She said the man was her husband. His name was George. He died 10 years ago. Sarah said she was sorry. Mrs. Henderson smiled and said it was okay. She said she had good memories of him. Tom was still nervous. He sat quietly at the table. He kept looking at the door. He wanted to make sure he knew where the exit was. Mrs. Henderson noticed this. She told him not to worry. She said she would not keep them there. She just wanted some company for a little while. Tom relaxed a bit after that. The kettle started to whistle. Mrs. Henderson made tea for all of them. She also brought out some cookies. She said she baked them yesterday. The tea was hot and sweet. The cookies were delicious. Sarah told Mrs. Henderson that she was a good baker. Mrs. Henderson thanked her. She said she used to bake all the time when her husband was alive. Now she only bakes sometimes. It was not as fun to bake for just one person. She asked Sarah and Tom about their families. Sarah told her about her parents and her little brother. Tom told her about his mom and his 2 sisters. Mrs. Henderson listened carefully to everything they said. She seemed very interested in their lives. She asked them about school. She asked what subjects they liked. Sarah said she liked history and reading. Tom said he liked sports and math. Mrs. Henderson said she loved reading too. She said the books upstairs were her collection from many years. Some of them were very old and valuable. Sarah asked Mrs. Henderson why she lived in the house alone. She asked why she did not move to a smaller place. Mrs. Henderson took a sip of her tea. She looked out the window. She said this house was her home. Every room had a story. Every corner had a memory. She could not leave those memories behind. In the living room, she danced with George on their wedding day. In the garden, she planted flowers with her mother. In the bedroom upstairs, she read stories to her daughter. Tom and Sarah looked at each other. They did not know Mrs. Henderson had a daughter. They did not see her in any pictures downstairs. Sarah asked about her daughter. Mrs. Henderson's face became sad. She was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. She said her daughter's name was Emily. Emily was a beautiful child. She was full of life and energy. The toys upstairs belonged to her. Emily loved dolls and the rocking horse. Mrs. Henderson stopped talking. Tears came to her eyes. Sarah felt bad for asking. She said Mrs. Henderson did not have to tell them if it made her sad. But Mrs. Henderson shook her head. She said it was okay. She said she wanted to tell someone. She had kept the story inside for too long. Emily got sick when she was only 7 years old. The doctors tried to help her, but the medicine did not work. Emily died in this house. That was 50 years ago. The kitchen became very quiet. Nobody spoke for a while. Sarah felt tears in her own eyes. Tom looked down at his hands. Mrs. Henderson wiped her eyes with a tissue. She said after Emily died, she and George were very sad. They never had more children. George wanted to sell the house and move away, but Mrs. Henderson could not leave. She felt Emily was still there somehow. She felt close to her daughter in this house. Sarah reached across the table and held Mrs. Henderson's hand. She told her she was sorry. She said Emily must have been a wonderful girl. Mrs. Henderson smiled through her tears. She said Emily was indeed wonderful. She was kind and sweet. She loved to sing and dance. She loved animals and flowers. Mrs. Henderson said keeping Emily's room the way it was helped her feel better. It was like Emily could come back any time. Tom asked if Mrs. Henderson was lonely. She nodded. She said sometimes she was very lonely. Her husband was gone. Her parents were gone. Emily was gone. She had some friends in town, but they were all getting old too. Some of them moved away. Some of them died. Young people today were always busy. They did not have time for old ladies like her. Sarah felt very sad hearing this. Sarah had an idea. She asked Mrs. Henderson if they could visit her again. She said they could come every week. They could help her with things around the house. They could talk with her. They could keep her company. Mrs. Henderson's face lit up. She asked if they really meant it. Sarah said yes. Tom agreed. He said they would be happy to visit. Mrs. Henderson started to cry again, but this time they were happy tears. Mrs. Henderson said they were very kind children. She said their parents raised them well. She said she would love to have them visit. She said she could teach them things. She could tell them stories about the old days. She could show them the books upstairs. She could teach Sarah how to bake. She could teach Tom about the garden. There was so much they could do together. They finished their tea and cookies. Mrs. Henderson walked them to the front door. She opened it properly this time. She did not want them climbing through windows. She said it was dangerous. She made them promise to use the door from now on. She would give them a key. Sarah and Tom promised. They said they would come back on Saturday. That was in 3 days. Mrs. Henderson hugged them both. She thanked them again. She said they made her very happy today. Even though they scared her at first, she was glad they came. Sarah and Tom walked back through the tall grass. They turned around and waved. Mrs. Henderson was standing at the door. She waved back. She looked happy. She did not look lonely anymore. On the way home, Sarah and Tom talked about everything that happened. Tom said he felt bad for being scared of the house. Sarah said it was okay. She was a little scared too. But now they knew the truth. The house was not scary. It was just old and full of memories. Tom agreed. He said Mrs. Henderson was very nice. He was glad they would visit her. Sarah said it would be like having a grandmother. Her own grandparents lived far away. She did not see them often. When Sarah got home, her mother asked where she had been. Sarah told her everything. She told her about the old house and Mrs. Henderson. She told her about Emily and George. She told her they promised to visit Mrs. Henderson every week. Her mother was surprised, but she was also proud of Sarah. Saturday came quickly. Sarah woke up early. She was excited to visit Mrs. Henderson. She put on her favorite blue shirt and jeans. She went downstairs for breakfast. Her mother made pancakes. Sarah ate quickly. Her little brother asked where she was going. She told him she was visiting a friend. Her mother smiled. She said it was very kind of Sarah to spend time with Mrs. Henderson. She packed some fresh bread and jam for Sarah to take. Sarah met Tom outside his house. He was ready too. He had his backpack with him. Inside the backpack, he brought some tools. He thought they could help fix things in the house. Sarah showed him the bread and jam her mother sent. Tom said his mother sent cookies. They walked together to the old house. This time they were not scared. They were happy. When they reached the house, Sarah knocked on the door. Mrs. Henderson opened it right away. She was waiting for them. She looked different today. She wore a nice dress. Her hair was combed neatly. She had a big smile on her face. She welcomed them inside. The house looked brighter somehow. Mrs. Henderson had opened some windows. Fresh air came inside. Some of the dust was gone. Mrs. Henderson took them to the kitchen. She made tea again. Sarah gave her the bread and jam. Tom gave her the cookies. Mrs. Henderson was very happy. She said they were too kind. She said she would save these treats for special occasions. They sat at the table and talked. Mrs. Henderson asked about their week at school. Sarah told her about a history test she took. Tom told her about a soccer game he played. After tea, Mrs. Henderson showed them around the house properly. She told them stories about each room. In the dining room, she said they had big family dinners every Sunday. Her parents would come. George's parents would come. Sometimes friends came too. The table would be full of food and laughter. In the living room, she said George liked to read the newspaper. He would sit in his favorite chair by the window. She would sit on the sofa and do her knitting. They went upstairs again. This time it did not feel scary. Mrs. Henderson showed them her bedroom. It was neat and simple. There were pictures of George on the table next to her bed. She said she talked to him every night before sleeping. She told him about her day. It made her feel like he was still with her. Sarah thought this was sweet. Tom thought it was a bit sad but also nice. Then they went to Emily's room. Mrs. Henderson opened the door slowly. She did not come to this room very often. It made her both happy and sad. The room was exactly as Emily left it. The bed was made. The dolls were on the shelf. The rocking horse was in the corner. There were drawings on the wall. Emily drew them when she was little. They were pictures of flowers and animals and her family. Mrs. Henderson picked up one of the dolls. She said it was Emily's favorite. Its name was Rose. Emily took Rose everywhere. She had tea parties with Rose. She told Rose all her secrets. Mrs. Henderson hugged the doll close to her chest. She closed her eyes. Sarah could see she was remembering. After a moment, Mrs. Henderson put Rose back on the shelf. She said they should go back downstairs. Being in this room too long made her heart hurt. In the kitchen, Tom asked Mrs. Henderson if she needed help with anything. Mrs. Henderson thought for a moment. She said the garden needed a lot of work. The grass was too tall. The flowers were all gone. There were weeds everywhere. Tom said he could help with that. He was good at outdoor work. His father taught him about gardens. Sarah said she could help too. Mrs. Henderson was grateful. She said the garden used to be beautiful. She wanted it to be beautiful again. They went outside to look at the garden. It was bigger than it looked from the street. There were old flower beds along the fence. There was a stone path in the middle, but everything was covered by tall grass and weeds. In the back corner there was a small shed. Mrs. Henderson said garden tools were in there. Tom opened the shed. Inside he found an old lawnmower, rakes, and other tools. Some were rusty, but they could still work. Tom started to cut the grass. The lawnmower was loud. It made smoke at first, but then it worked better. Sarah used a rake to collect the cut grass. Mrs. Henderson sat on a chair and watched them. She pointed to places where flowers used to grow. She told them the names of the flowers. There were roses, daisies, tulips, and sunflowers. Sarah loved sunflowers. Mrs. Henderson said they would plant new ones. They worked for 2 hours. The garden started to look better. Tom was sweating. Sarah's arms were tired, but they did not stop. They wanted to make Mrs. Henderson happy. When they finished, they all stood back and looked at their work. The grass was short now. The path was clear. They could see the shape of the old flower beds. Mrs. Henderson clapped her hands. She said it looked wonderful. She had not seen the garden this clean in years. They went back inside to rest. Mrs. Henderson made sandwiches for lunch. She used the bread that Sarah brought. They ate in the kitchen. The windows were open. A nice breeze came through. They could smell the fresh-cut grass. Mrs. Henderson said this was the best day she had in a long time. Sarah said it was a good day for them too. Tom agreed. He said helping people felt good. After lunch, Mrs. Henderson took them to the library room. This was the room with all the books. She showed them her favorite books. There were books about history, books about nature, and books with stories. Sarah was amazed. She had never seen so many books in a house before. Mrs. Henderson said Sarah could borrow any book she wanted. Sarah chose a book about ancient Egypt. She always wanted to learn more about pyramids. Mrs. Henderson also had old photo albums. She showed them pictures from her life. There were pictures of her as a baby, pictures from her wedding day, pictures of Emily as a baby and a little girl, pictures of family trips to the beach and the mountains. Sarah and Tom loved looking at the old photographs. The clothes people wore were funny. The cars looked old and strange. Mrs. Henderson laughed looking at the pictures. She told them stories about each photograph. Time passed quickly. Soon it was late afternoon. Sarah and Tom had to go home. Their parents expected them for dinner. Mrs. Henderson walked them to the door. She gave them each a hug. She said they were wonderful children. She said she was lucky to know them. She asked if they would come again next week. They said yes, of course. They would come every Saturday. Mrs. Henderson gave Sarah the key to the house. She said Sarah could keep it safe. On the way home, Tom said he had a great time. Sarah agreed. She said Mrs. Henderson was like the grandmother she never had. Tom said helping with the garden was fun. He said next week they should work more on it. They could clear the flower beds. They could plant new flowers. Sarah said that was a good idea. She would ask her mother for flower seeds. Maybe her mother would come meet Mrs. Henderson too. The weeks passed by quickly. Sarah and Tom visited Mrs. Henderson every Saturday. Sometimes they came on other days too. They became very close to her. The house became like a second home to them. Sarah's mother came to visit one Saturday. She brought a homemade cake. She met Mrs. Henderson and they liked each other right away. They talked about recipes and gardening. Tom's mother came the next week. She brought some plants for the garden. The mothers were happy their children found such a good friend. The garden was looking beautiful again. Tom and Sarah worked hard on it. They cleared all the flower beds, they planted new seeds. Mrs. Henderson helped by telling them where each type of flower should go. She remembered exactly how the garden used to look. Soon, small green shoots came up from the soil. Then buds appeared. Then flowers bloomed. There were red roses, yellow daisies, purple tulips, and tall sunflowers. The garden had color again. It had life again. Mrs. Henderson started spending more time outside. She would sit in the garden and read. Sometimes she would just close her eyes and enjoy the sun. The neighbors noticed the changes. They saw the clean garden. They saw children visiting. Some neighbors came to talk to Mrs. Henderson. They had not talked to her in years. They thought she wanted to be alone. But now they realized she was just lonely. More people started to wave and say hello. Mrs. Henderson was becoming part of the neighborhood again. One Saturday, Sarah asked Mrs. Henderson about her daughter Emily. She wanted to know more about her. What did she like to do? What were her favorite things? Mrs. Henderson smiled. She was happy to talk about Emily. She said Emily loved to draw and paint. She loved colors. Her favorite color was yellow, like the sun. Emily also loved music. She would sing all day long. She made up her own songs. Mrs. Henderson said Emily had a beautiful voice. Mrs. Henderson went to a closet and brought out a box. Inside the box were Emily's drawings and paintings. Sarah and Tom looked through them carefully. Emily was very talented. There were pictures of the garden in full bloom, pictures of birds and butterflies, pictures of her parents smiling. One picture showed the whole family having a picnic. Everyone looked so happy. Sarah felt sad that Emily did not get to grow up. She would have been an amazing artist. Tom found something else in the box. It was a small notebook. He asked if he could look at it. Mrs. Henderson nodded. The notebook had Emily's handwriting. She wrote little stories and poems. Tom read one poem out loud. It was about a sunflower that grew very tall. It wanted to touch the sky. The poem was sweet and simple. It made everyone smile. Mrs. Henderson said Emily wrote that poem right before she got sick. She was only 7 years old, but she loved to write. Sarah had an idea. She asked Mrs. Henderson if they could do something special to remember Emily. Maybe they could create something in the garden. Mrs. Henderson asked what she meant. Sarah said they could make a special corner in the garden just for Emily. They could plant yellow flowers there because yellow was her favorite color. They could put a small bench where people could sit and remember her. Mrs. Henderson started to cry. She said that was the most beautiful idea anyone ever had. The next week, they started working on Emily's corner. They chose the sunniest spot in the garden. It was under a big oak tree. Tom and his father built a wooden bench. They painted it white. Sarah and her mother planted yellow flowers all around. They planted yellow roses, yellow tulips, and yellow daffodils. Mrs. Henderson found a smooth stone. She painted Emily's name on it with the dates of her birth and death. Under that, she painted a yellow sunflower. They placed the stone near the bench. When everything was finished, they all sat on the bench together. Mrs. Henderson held Sarah's hand and Tom's hand. She looked at all the yellow flowers. She looked at the stone with Emily's name. She said this was perfect. She said Emily would have loved it. She said from now on, this would be a place of happiness, not sadness. Anyone who came to the garden could sit here and feel peaceful. Sarah said Emily would always be remembered this way. More time passed. Sarah and Tom kept visiting regularly. They helped Mrs. Henderson with many things. They helped her clean the house. They helped her shop for groceries. They read to her when her eyes were tired. They told her about their lives at school. Mrs. Henderson helped them too. She helped Sarah with her homework. She taught Tom how to bake bread. She told them stories about history and the old days. They learned so much from her. One day, Mrs. Henderson told them she had an idea. She wanted to have a garden party. She wanted to invite the neighbors. She wanted to show everyone the beautiful garden. She wanted to thank Sarah and Tom for all their help. She also wanted people to see Emily's corner. She wanted Emily to be remembered by everyone, not just by her. Sarah and Tom thought this was a wonderful idea. They helped her plan the party. They made invitations together. They delivered them to all the houses on the street. The invitation said there would be a garden party at Mrs. Henderson's house next Saturday. Everyone was welcome. There would be tea, cakes, and sandwiches. Sarah's mother and Tom's mother said they would help with the food. Other neighbors said they would bring things too. Everyone was excited. Nobody had been to Mrs. Henderson's house in many years. The day of the party arrived. It was a beautiful sunny day. Sarah and Tom came early to help set up. They put tables and chairs in the garden. They set out plates and cups. Mrs. Henderson baked 3 big cakes. Sarah's mother brought cookies. Tom's mother brought lemonade. Other neighbors brought fruit and sandwiches. There was so much food. The garden looked amazing with all the flowers in bloom. People started to arrive at 2 o'clock. Neighbors came from all over the street. Some brought their children. Some brought their grandchildren. Everyone was surprised by how beautiful the garden was. They walked around looking at all the flowers. They said nice things about the work Sarah and Tom did. Mrs. Henderson was glowing with happiness. She talked to everyone. She laughed and smiled more than she had in years. Mrs. Henderson gathered everyone around Emily's corner. She told them about her daughter. She told them how Emily loved yellow and flowers and sunshine. She told them how Sarah and Tom helped her create this special place. She said Emily would be so happy knowing that people were enjoying the garden. Some of the older neighbors remembered Emily. They shared their own memories of her. They said she was a sweet child who always smiled. One lady said Emily once gave her a flower from this very garden. After that, everyone ate and drank and enjoyed the afternoon. Children played on the grass. Adults sat and talked. Tom organized games for the kids. Sarah helped serve food. Mrs. Henderson sat on Emily's bench and watched everything. Her heart was full. Her house was full of life again. Her garden was full of laughter again. She was not lonely anymore. She had friends. She had family. She had Sarah and Tom who were like her own grandchildren. The summer came and Sarah and Tom had more free time. They visited Mrs. Henderson almost every day. Sometimes they came in the morning. Sometimes they came in the afternoon. Mrs. Henderson was always happy to see them. She said they brought sunshine into her life. The house felt alive now. There was always something happening. Someone was always laughing or talking or doing something fun. Mrs. Henderson taught them many things that summer. She taught Sarah how to bake different kinds of cakes and cookies. She taught her how to make bread from scratch. Sarah became very good at baking. She would take her creations home to share with her family. Her little brother loved the chocolate chip cookies she made. Her parents were proud of her new skills. Sarah said she learned from the best teacher. Tom learned about gardening from Mrs. Henderson. She taught him which plants needed more water, which ones needed shade, which ones needed full sun. She taught him about soil and compost. She taught him about bugs that were good for the garden and bugs that were bad. Tom became very interested in plants. He started a small garden at his own house. He grew tomatoes and peppers. His mother was amazed. She said Tom never showed interest in gardening before. One day, Mrs. Henderson showed them something special. She took them to the attic. They had never been there before. The attic was dusty but full of interesting things. There were old trunks and boxes. There were old clothes and hats. There were old toys and games. Mrs. Henderson said these were things from many years ago. Some belonged to her parents. Some belonged to her and George. Some belonged to Emily. They spent the whole afternoon exploring the attic. It was like finding treasure. In one trunk they found old letters. The letters were between Mrs. Henderson and George when they were young. Before they got married, George went away to work in another city. They wrote letters to each other every week. The letters were full of love and hope and dreams. Mrs. Henderson read some of them out loud. Her voice was soft and sweet. Sarah thought it was the most romantic thing ever. In another box, they found old toys that belonged to Emily. There was a wooden train set. There was a tin tea set. There were old books with pictures. Tom found a small music box. When he opened it, it played a gentle tune. A tiny ballerina spun around inside. Mrs. Henderson said this was Emily's most precious toy. Her grandmother gave it to her. Emily would wind it up every night before bed and watch the ballerina dance. Then she would fall asleep to the music. Sarah asked Mrs. Henderson if she ever thought about selling these things. Mrs. Henderson shook her head. She said these things were memories. They could not be sold. Each item had a story. Each item meant something. They were all she had left of the people she loved. Sarah understood. She said she would keep all her special things too. Tom said he still had his baby blanket at home. His mother tried to throw it away once, but he would not let her. Mrs. Henderson laughed. She said we all have things that connect us to our past. Before they left the attic, Mrs. Henderson gave them each something. She gave Sarah a beautiful old book. It was a collection of fairy tales with hand-drawn pictures. Mrs. Henderson said she read these stories to Emily every night. Now she wanted Sarah to have it. Sarah was honored. She promised to take good care of it. Mrs. Henderson gave Tom an old pocket watch. It belonged to George. The watch still worked. Mrs. Henderson said George would want Tom to have it. Tom did not know what to say. He just hugged Mrs. Henderson tight. As summer continued, more neighbors became friends with Mrs. Henderson. The lady next door started coming over for tea every Tuesday. A man from across the street helped fix things in the house that were broken. A young couple down the road brought their baby to visit. Mrs. Henderson loved holding the baby. She said it reminded her of when Emily was small. The whole street was becoming like one big family. Sarah and Tom noticed that Mrs. Henderson seemed tired sometimes. She moved slower than before. Sometimes she forgot things. One day she forgot that Tom did not like carrots. She made carrot soup for lunch. Tom ate it anyway because he did not want to hurt her feelings. Another day she called Sarah by Emily's name by mistake. Then she realized what she did and apologized. Sarah said it was okay. She was not upset. But she was a little worried about Mrs. Henderson. Sarah told her mother about it. Her mother said Mrs. Henderson was very old. Old people get tired more easily. Sometimes they forget things. It was normal. But she said it was good that Sarah and Tom were there to help her. She said they should keep visiting and watching over her. If anything seemed really wrong, they should tell their parents. Sarah promised she would pay attention. One Saturday they arrived and found Mrs. Henderson still in bed. She was not feeling well. She had a cold. Sarah and Tom took care of her. They made her soup. They brought her tea. They fluffed her pillows. They read to her. Mrs. Henderson said they were angels. She said she was lucky to have them. By the end of the day, she felt a little better, but she was still weak. Tom's mother came to check on her. She said Mrs. Henderson should rest for a few days. She said she would come back to check on her every day. For the next week, Sarah and Tom visited every day after school. They made sure Mrs. Henderson had food. They made sure she took her medicine. They kept her company. They did not play in the garden. They stayed inside with her. Mrs. Henderson got better slowly. She said she would have been very sick without them. She said they saved her. Sarah said that is what families do. They take care of each other. Mrs. Henderson smiled. She said they were her family now. When Mrs. Henderson was better, she told them something important. She said she was thinking about the future. She was not going to live forever. She was already very old. She wanted to make sure the house and garden would be taken care of after she was gone. She wanted Emily to be remembered. She wanted all the memories in the house to be preserved. She asked Sarah and Tom what they thought she should do. Sarah and Tom thought carefully. Tom said maybe she could turn the house into a community center. People could come there to learn about gardening and baking. Sarah said maybe part of the house could be a small museum. It could show what life was like in the old days. It could tell Emily's story. Mrs. Henderson liked these ideas. She said she would think about them. She said she would talk to a lawyer. She wanted to make sure everything was planned properly. That night, Sarah lay in bed thinking. She realized how much Mrs. Henderson meant to her. She realized how much she learned from her. She learned about kindness and patience. She learned about holding on to memories. She learned about not being afraid to open your heart to people. She learned that old people have so much wisdom to share. She was grateful for that day when she decided to explore the old house. It changed her life. It changed Mrs. Henderson's life too. Sometimes the best adventures lead to the best friendships.